how you learn to make decisions is how you learn to decide. Are you a spender or you're a saver? Christians are notorious for wanting to grow, but not want to invest in the growth. For a preacher to say this, you know, and there's a challenge or a problem, whatever, and you waiting for it to resolve itself. Because I've done that. Like, Lord, fix it. Like, Lord, speak to them.
Yeah.
Like, Lord, change their mind. No, some decisions you have to engage. You have to do something.
All right, hello and welcome to the How to Win podcast. I am Tiffany Moore and I'm here with your host, Mike Moore. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to make, or when you have to make a difficult decision. So before we get right into it, if you are watching and you have been watching with us for a while, but yet you still have not become a part of our family, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. So I feel like there are some decisions that can change your day, like, you know, what you wear, what you eat, and those decisions you don't have to really think much about. But then there are some decisions that change or impact your life. And those I feel like are a little bit harder to, they kind of stick with you a little bit more. Why do you think that there are decisions that are harder? There are some decisions that are harder than others.
You know, I'll say this about this decision-making thing, and then I answer the question. I think that one of the keys to being a successful person in any arena, you know, doesn't have to be in a spiritual or religious. In any arena, decision making is just so important. You know, I pastored for decades, and the decision making part is the challenge because you have to make major decisions. Answering your question, why some decisions are heavier or are more weighted than other decisions, because of the consequences, because of the stakes are higher. When we were small, when we were a small church, and this illustration would apply to anything, if we made $100 decision, I mean, if we miss it, the stakes are not that high. Well, when you're making $1 million decisions, then the stakes are high. The consequences are weightier, and sometimes decisions are heavier because of your connections with people. You know what I mean? If you're in the people business, you're making decisions about people, and you're making decisions that impact their lives. That could be true even in your family. You know, in your family, you've got children, you're making decisions that will impact their lives. And then, you know, some decisions you can't reverse them once you make them.
So we're talking about making a difficult decision. Do you think that some decisions that are small can impact the bigger decisions? So for instance, some of the decisions of how you operate day to day in your business, or how you operate parenting in your household, do you think that can later impact a major decision?
Yeah, it can impact your major decisions, because how you learn to make decisions is how you learn to decide. So even small decisions, learning to think through. You know, many decisions that we make in life are spontaneous. And they are emotion driven. And so I think learning to make decisions should be something that you should do intentionally. So it begins with small things, especially if you're dealing with God. God is not going to throw some heavy thing at you, you know, because we're in training. It's like your kids, like you, a parent. I mean, you wouldn't ask your child to make a major decision. You asking your child to make decisions about their homework. You asking them to make decisions about their friends. These are, in their mind, minor decisions, but you know how you learn to make decisions, or whether you think through or not on your decisions. It's going to follow you.
Yeah.
You know, you decision making is something you grow in. You know, you don't start off mastering decision making.
Do you think that you ever get to the point where you master decisions? I think about some of the decisions that I make, and I try to not use this word, but I tend to be indecisive. And so a lot of times, like if I'm doing something with my friends, or if I'm asking about clothes, or if I'm asking about shoes or an outfit, and I'll be like, hey, do you like this? And then they'll give me an answer, and then I'll be like, well, I don't know if I like this. And then I'm kind of constantly in my mind when it comes to decision making. And I remember I was talking to some coworkers the other day, and we were talking about how they'll buy something and then they'll get home and be like, I don't like this, and they take it back, right? Do you think those little decisions of being indecisive in the smaller areas come to impact us later on? It's kind of like the question that I asked earlier. Do you think those decisions later impact you on later in life? So for example, with me, I'm indecisive a lot of times when it comes to if I like something as far as clothes and different things like that. But I think I could also be indecisive when it comes to decisions of if I should do other things that are kind of major. Does that make sense?
Well, I think having a framework, and most people don't think like that, but hopefully we can begin to think like that. Having a framework for how you make decisions, and then understanding yourself and being honest with yourself. People are different in the way they operate life.
Yeah.
Some people are more analytical. Some people are more spontaneous. Some people are more emotional. And you have to really self-discover. You got to discover, okay, what do you like? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Like, for example, if you're an analytical person, you're going to analyze everything in terms of finances. You're going to analyze things in terms of time. You're going to analyze, do I need this? Do I don't need this? And, okay, there's some positives to that, and then there's some negatives to that. Because if you start analyzing something that costs $10 or $5, you know, you like these stores where they have these discounts. Well, if you're sitting up there thinking it's $4, it's a $4 item, and if you got to go through all these different steps on the $4 item, then some of that is not just that you're analytical. It may be that you're cheap.
So I remember you did a sermon. Refresh my memory. Do you remember you did a sermon and you were talking about the different types of spenders that you had, and you had to, or maybe it was MK, but you had to decide what type of spender you were. Like if you were a in the moment type of spender, are you I'm going to save my money and spend type of thing? Do you remember? Did you do that?
I don't remember that, but let's talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. That's what I mean about being honest with yourself. Let's take a natural illustration. Can you walk in a store and see something that you like,
right,
and you cannot leave that store without getting it?
Well, you know my answer. You know the answer to that.
Okay, what is the answer to that?
It's usually a no for me, but you know, especially if it's a real good deal too.
Yeah, and so the problem with that, Tiffany, if I cannot walk in a store and see something I desire and walk out without getting it,
Yeah.
then I'm being led by my desires.
You challenged me. I think you was like, just go in the store and don't buy nothing. I think you challenged me one
Right.
time.
And the whole purpose of that is to develop discipline.
Yeah.
You know, discipline, people who get ahead, they save money, they invest money. People who get ahead are not just consumers. And so if you have a consumer mentality where you're constantly consuming. Now, I like clothes, I like shopping, I like that. But sometimes you have to learn how to go in and come out. And sometimes, okay, I'll get that later.
Yeah.
Because okay, let me ask you a question. What is problematic about, what are the consequences of me or you going in a store, seeing something we desire, and we have to get it every time we see something we desire? What are the consequences of that?
Well, you're making rash decisions and you don't really know what, for some people they may know, but you usually don't know what your budget is like. You don't know if that money should be going towards other things, if that's something that so you're just kind of making impulse purchase.
And so you're neglecting priorities.
Yeah.
Because if you have a certain amount of income and you got expenses, you got car payments, you got utility bills, you may have a mortgage or you may be rent or whatever, those are priorities.
Right.
So if you're the kind of person that you go in a store and you have to make a decision to get it, then what you're doing, you're neglecting priorities. And so you're going to end up either seriously in debt or you're going to end up really sacrificing what are real priorities for likes.
Yeah.
And that's what get people in financial trouble. Okay, let me ask you a question. There are all kinds of decisions. There are time-related decisions.
Right.
Okay. There are value-related decisions. There are emotional decisions. And then there are emotional connection decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, do you understand the difference between an emotional decision and an emotional connection decision? What do you think I mean by that?
I feel like emotional decision is you're making a decision off of how you feel in that moment.
Right.
Emotional connection decision is you're making a decision based off of someone else's feelings.
Someone else's feelings. So what is the toughest kind of decision for you to make? Is it value-based decisions, emotional decisions, emotional connection decisions? What are the most difficult kind of decisions for you to make?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably emotional connection decisions. Yeah. Because I tend to care about what people say or people's opinions. And so it can be an emotional connection decision from people who I know, and it can be an emotional connection decision from people who I don't know.
Okay.
So if I'm concerned about, I was doing a session, and they were talking about imposter syndrome, and so you can make a decision off of a emotional connection with what you think others may think about you, or you may make a decision based off of what someone close think about you.
And those are difficult ones. When you're making a decision and it's impacting somebody else,
Yeah.
or you're concerned about what somebody else will feel about your decision, For example, when I was led, I pastored a denominational church for about a year, a little over a year, and I felt led to leave that particular church. My primary thought was, now I knew God was leading me, but my primary thoughts were, because the kids at that church used to love, they come up to me and stuff, and I was thinking, well, what about them?
Yeah.
Okay. And then my mother was so excited that I had a church. Well, what about her? You know what? If we're not careful, we'll make bad decisions because we're concerned about what other folk think,
Right.
even though we know it's the best decision. So I got another question for you. See, I
Okay.
knew you were gonna ask me all these questions, so I got another question. What is particular difficult decisions as it relates to two good options?
You asking me in my personal life?
Yeah, I'm asking you your perspective. Isn't it difficult when you got two good options?
Yeah.
So how do you navigate two good options? Let's say
Yeah.
you got a job, two offers.
So I haven't in my personal experience experienced that, but I've had a friend who recently had a decision where she had to choose between taking the current job that she had where she was making more money, but or going to another job where she was more passionate about. And so each one has their pros and cons. The one she was passionate about, it gave her more energy, vibrancy. She felt like she was doing more things in life, but the pay was less. And then the other one was the pay is better, but she really didn't feel excitement about it. She ended up going with the one that she was passionate about because she felt like in the long run that would help her make decisions in life in every area of life. So I think it really just, when it comes to those type of decisions, it's easier said than done because especially now in the world that we're looking at, the money can seem like a better decision, which I do want to go back to you on the money perspective. And so I think it really just kind of goes back into what you were talking about, figuring out the framework. So figuring out that spiritual framework, but then also the natural framework for your life. The question that I was going to go back, because we kind of dove off into the financial part, and I know we're not financial experts, but you talked about having a framework when it comes to decision making, when it comes to money. So I know that there are different type of people who are watching us. You have the person who is a spender, and then you have the person who is a saver, right? What is the framework for the person who is a spender? What does that look like? And what is the framework for the person who is a saver but never spends?
Well, I think the framework begins with evaluating what kind of person you are. You know, are you a spender or you're a saver? Okay, so if your first impulse is to spend, then that's going to be problematic for you if you don't have some boundaries
Yeah.
on that. And I'll come back and talk about those boundaries. If you are a, let's say, saver, then you have to also set some boundaries, because I personally feel like you have to guard yourself from being overly conservative.
Yeah.
Because if you're overly conservative, you and let's push likes off the table. Sometimes there are opportunities. They may be investment opportunities. They may be connections with environment opportunities. For example, what if there's a conference or a seminar that can make you better? Okay, and you just so I can't spend that money. You know what I mean? You got it, but I can't spend that money. Now you're extreme because investing that money in the seminar may help you to grow financially.
That's so good that you're talking about this because I recently bought a course from a girl and I spent money on it and it was really, really good. And some of the stuff that she was talking about was very, very helpful for me. And she came out with another course and I know, like I am not uncertain. I know for a fact that this course will be beneficial for me. But I'm like, this is just some more money that I'm going to be giving to her. And I'm just like, should I do this or should I do this not? So I do think that
it will be more beneficial to you.
Yeah, it would be more beneficial
okay, so
to me.
That's a part of that's a part of the boundaries. Are we saving money out of fear?
Right. Because I know it's gonna be good, but it's just like I just spent some money on this. Like it's a course, but there's another part of it that will really. So one part was like the preparation. Let's say if it's like with podcasting, the preparation for podcasting, right? But the second course is the videography, the audio, and all of that part. So they go together, but it's just like I just spent one on this one. Should I?
Okay. To me, this is my opinion.
Okay.
There's a difference between a consumption item. Like, for example, I just want a new vehicle. They got this new, or it can be a new phone.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I just want, okay, but it's a consumption item.
Right.
It's not creating anything for me. It's just or I like those shoes. I like that jacket. See, I like clothes, so I like that. But technically, it's not producing anything for me. I just like it.
Yeah.
You know, I like it. I'm consuming. So on this side of saving, okay, why are you saving? Are you saving out of fear? Because if you're saving out of fear, you can't even use it.
Yeah.
And does this over here increase you? Increase where you're trying to go? Now it's a value system. Do you value growth? Do you value education? Do you value that kind of thing? And if you value growth, then you're going to have to use some of this in order to grow. Sometimes people want to grow, but they want to pray growth.
Yeah.
You know, they want to pray growth. Okay, God, help me to grow. And they want to pray growth. Download growth in me.
Yeah.
But some things people have to invest in order to grow. And Christians are notorious. Okay, Christians are notorious for wanting to grow, but not want to invest in the growth.
Yeah.
What is it going to cost me to grow?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it's going to cost you time. Sometimes it's going to cost you money. And most of the time it's going to cost you time.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's going to cost you money. So what do you value? Do you value just having this money so you can feel secure out of your fear of not being broke? You see, I'm not going to touch this at all because I'm afraid. So now I don't take advantage of opportunities that can increase me personally or increase my income so that's the downside. I think the positive is that you should be saving because the Bible speaks about saving.
Well,
but you can be extreme in other things.
I was going to ask you about the parable of the sower. The one who sowed and then the one who didn't, he hid his money away. I'm going to get your wisdom from this. Because in my mind, when I used to read it, I used to think, well, that's kind of good that he saved the money and he didn't spend it. But yet he was reprimanded for not spending the money. So give me your wisdom on clarifying what the one with the talents. Was this more of they didn't use the talents that they had, or was it that they was just trying to be wiser in that. Do you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay. The king gave talents, and in that day, the talent was not a skill; it was money.
Okay.
Okay, and the king obviously wanted them to take the money and to increase it,
Okay.
to bring value to it.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so one invested the money and got 5 more talents. The other one that had 2 talents invested it, got 2 more talents. So they actually doubled what they had. The other guy had a talent, and it was a large sum of money if you go back and think it out. But he hid it in the ground, and he said, "I was afraid." And the king called him a wicked and slothful servant. So that tells us that God intends for us to invest and increase our stewardship. We should invest it. And that's everything, whether it's money, whether it's our skill, whether it's faith. He gives us a measure of faith, but faith can grow. So God wants us to add value to what he gives us.
Yeah.
So if we just hold on to something, it doesn't grow. Now, okay, that's what I would say about that. But let's talk for a minute about, I think, something that's, because we're talking about decisions, and I think you can be in balance, and it's going to sound strange for a preacher to say this. You know, I'm a spiritual leader. We can be in balance on the spiritual side and in balance on the natural side.
Okay.
And I think sometimes Christians who really value the word and believe in, let's say, tithing and confession and faith,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't do what they should do naturally. You know, it's a simple illustration, but it's one thing to believe God for a job. It's another thing to do what's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What we need to do on a practical side. If you're selling a house, sure, you want to believe God that the house will sell. But what about the repairs that need to be done in the house? What upgrades can you bring in the house, like the yard or whatever, getting the house painted or whatever, or you're selling a car, but bring the car up, put some value in it, and then sell it. I think sometimes we lean so heavy on the spiritual that we're not doing the natural thing that we need to do.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Again, in one of the sessions that I was in with some of the other instructors and stuff that I was in the class with, we were talking about limiting beliefs. And I think this kind of goes back into it. I think a lot of times when it comes to spiritual and the natural part, I think people get stuck in their minds and their thought process. And again, it kind of goes into this question of how can someone evaluate their options clearly when emotions are involved? And I think
that's a good question.
And I think a lot of times what happens is people get into this limiting belief. So let's say going back into the world of health and wellness, people have a limiting belief of, I don't have enough time to work out, right? So that's going to limit their decisions because they have this thought process of, well, I just don't have time to work out. And so one of the practices or one of the ways that you combat that limiting belief is like just kind of closing your mind and just thinking about positive ways or positive outcomes to incorporate, whether it be walking for 10 minutes or it's driving farther and walking and stuff like that. I think a lot of it has to do with we get into our thoughts. And so a lot of times the spiritual part where you're talking about, people can't go into the natural part because they're stuck in their thoughts. And I think that is a trick of the enemy to get you stuck in your thoughts. And that way you don't pour into your actions of the natural.
I like that. I like the emphasis that you're placing on our beliefs. Because sometimes our beliefs can be limiting, and sometimes our beliefs can be false. But that question about how do you make decisions when there's a lot of emotions involved? I would say, if you can, we talked about self-evaluating.
Yeah.
Am I emotion driven? Then you got to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes a little pause, a little delay, you know, and here again, we're talking about decisions. Let's say a spender. You walk in the store, you see this, all these emotions. I got to have this. This may not be, you know. I think sometimes it's helpful, even if you wanted to pause and go. It could be an hour. It can be a day, you know, and pause. And then if a lot of emotions involved, okay, then you got to think of priorities, value. Slow it down just a little bit.
Yeah.
And think about something other than how you're feeling emotionally. That would be true even if you're in a relationship. Man, you can get in a relationship and boy, you can be, this is decision, you can be telling that person all your business, all your intimate stuff, because emotionally you are very attracted to this person and maybe the person is attracted to you. I think a decision to not talk marriage. Let's don't talk marriage. Let's talk growth. Let's talk relationship. Let's talk get to know each other.
Yeah.
Because you can get so emotional about it, and the emotions are in the driver's seat. Pause. Let's date a while. Let's find out alignment. Don't even talk engagement yet, because engagement put pressure on you. It put pressure on you. Let's talk values. Let's evaluate our values. Or do we have the same values concerning money, concerning children, the same values concerning church, concerning business, concerning paying bills, concerning debt? Do we have the same kind of values concerning communication? Conflict, taking the time, and I think dating is a wonderful thing, and I think people rush a lot of times, and then they make the decision to get engaged. Now they got a timeline on it, so we got to do all this stuff. So even if we're going through, and that's a good decision to go through premarital counseling, we're not thinking about adjusting. We're thinking about finishing this so we can do this. So emotions are challenging. It's good to feel great about someone and to feel some teaching purpose. If I was single, I would want to date a while. I mean, I want friendship. I want to develop friendship. I want to see you without the makeup. You know, you see me without the nice clothes on and all that. And if we can get across that emotion should not be in the driver's seat of the decision, it will make a big difference. Okay, I got a question. I'm enjoying this. What should the role of prayer, wisdom, and counsel be in decision making?
When it comes to, I know Pastor MK is talking about the Holy Spirit, and I've been studying more with the Holy Spirit. I think where prayer comes in is man, how did I hear it? I can't remember how I heard it, but I feel like prayer is the way that you open up to hear from God,
Okay.
to hear where you should be going. I think if you never get into that, the moment of prayer, you're never going to be able to. I won't say you won't never be able to, but it just limits more of your opportunities to hear from God. So I feel like praying and asking the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you will help you in those decision making. I think another thing, because I was going to ask you about that fear aspect, but I'll get back to you on that one. I think the Holy Spirit can help you when it comes to that fear aspect of if I make the wrong decision, because I think that can hinder a lot of people.
Okay.
And I think that's where the wisdom point comes back to, where it also comes into the investing into a mentor or finding a mentor or even having a counselor. I think those things are important because sometimes you may not necessarily have to make the decision on your own. Someone who has experience in that area may be able to help guide you in some of those ways.
I agree. I agree with everything. Let me tell you my position on it. Prayer. Okay, let's start with wisdom first, and then we'll go to counsel, and then we'll go to prayer. Okay, that would be a real good framework, especially if you're making major decisions. Let's start off with wisdom. Okay. Without being spiritual, because the Bible talks about basically the word being wisdom, but I'm not talking about that. When I think about wisdom, I'm thinking about practical wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay. My past experiences. Usually, you gain wisdom from your past experiences. I did that.
Right.
That worked out. I did that. It did not work out. I think sometimes thinking of, okay, what have my experiences taught me?
Right.
Okay. This is a good one. Patterns. How have I made decisions in the past? That's self-evaluating. What are the patterns in my life? Okay. If I'm making decisions about people, what are patterns, connections?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If a person, I'm not saying divorce is wrong, but if a person has had 5 divorces in 5 years, okay, I got to think about that.
Yeah.
See, I can't ignore that. If I have had 5 divorces in 5 years, I got to think about that.
Yeah.
I got to think just wisdom. Okay, if this person has been divorced 5 times, nobody died, 5 times in 5 years, there's a pattern.
Yeah.
Either this person has something that the person needs to adjust, or the person is making bad decisions
Right.
about selecting people. If it's true of me, then I got to understand, why have I been in 5 relationships and had 5 divorces in 5 years? See, wisdom deals with experience and pattern connections. That's just wisdom. Okay,
Yeah.
if some things are not spiritual, it's just wisdom.
Yeah.
Am I ready for this, or I'm ready for that? But I think we're going to talk about readiness somewhere. But anyway, experience. Okay, let's talk counsel. Why is it important to talk to people who've been there and done that, or have an expertise? It may be a financial counselor, spiritual counselor, marriage counselor, or whatever. They help me with blind spots. They help me to be more objective because, see, I'm viewing things out of my own perspective, but they may have a bigger, broader perspective, and it helps me. Let's talk about prayer. God can see the past, the present, and the future all at the same time.
Yeah.
I see right now. God can see how this decision may impact me long term.
Yeah. I thought you were finna say something. Go deeper into.
No, I was trying to give a framework of wisdom,
Yeah.
counsel, that's outside counsel, and prayer. I think if you combine that, I ask you a question. We ain't got much time, but I want to ask you a question. Why do people delay making decisions in your thinking? Why do we think about you? Why do we delay?
Well, that was going to be the question that I was going to end with you because sometimes people could have the wisdom. They could be praying about certain stuff. Like even when I think about the Bible, God spoke to certain people about doing certain stuff, so they knew it was God. Some people had in the Bible mentors, so they knew that was wise decisions. But I think the thing that stopped them from going full force into decision once they had to make a decision was fear.
Fear.
So
that's huge.
Yeah. So when it comes to, because I think it's a natural part of growth, you see it all throughout the Bible. Moses had to make a decision. He was afraid. I don't really think Joseph was afraid, but I think David had a decision. He was kind of afraid in some areas of his life. So I feel like every person experiences fear at some point or another in life. So I think the fear aspect of it. So the question I was going to ask you is, what do you do when you're stuck in that fear part of making a major decision? Because like I said, there are some decisions in life, it doesn't keep you stuck, it doesn't impact you at all. But then there are major decisions that in some people's mind feel like, if I marry this person and it don't go right, what may happen? Or if I move my family to this location and it don't work out, what will happen?
Well, there's some other things too, along with the fear. But I think if you have a framework of wisdom, counsel, and prayer, you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But there's another thing that causes people to delay. It's similar to fear, and that is uncertainty. Okay.
Oh, not being able to see the end. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes we want to see the end.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be successful if you have to see the end before you do.
Yeah.
That's risk, it's a risk, but it's not foolish because if you've examined from a point of wisdom, you got outside counsel from people who have the expertise, and then you spent quality time praying. Now you want something that God is not going to give you. Because if you talk to God, but you want to be certain that then you're dealing with a lack of trust.
Yeah.
See, you're dealing with a lack of trust. Now, if you hadn't touched your basis, if you hadn't thought through on the framework of wisdom, and I gave you some examples of wisdom, experience, pattern connections, and then counsel, you got people talking to you, and then you praying, and a part of prayer is listening. You don't have you got peace down in your spirit, then you have to do it because the desire for uncertainty is, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have that up front. I'll share something else with you. That uncertain piece, in many cases, you're going to have to make some decisions without having full information.
Yeah.
For example, God said to Abraham, the Bible said, by faith, he obeyed.
Yeah.
when he was told to go out, not knowing where he was going.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get enough information, but if you're waiting for full information, you'll not ever make the decision. And I got a question before we close. I got another question.
Okay.
I got a question. What happens if we delay too long? What if we procrastinate? What happens if we take too long to make a decision?
I think it can slow your promise. I don't necessarily think it takes away your promise. I just think that it may not be as soon as you want it. So for instance, like when you think about the Israelites, the promise was always, was it Canaan? Or the promised land? What was it? What was the promised land?
Canaan was the promised land.
Okay, so it was always Canaan. I just think that it delayed because they took too long to do what God told them to do, but the promise still came. It just may not have came to them. Does that make sense?
Let's make it very practical. Take it even out of the spiritual realm. If I take too long to make a decision, if it's a problem, and I got to make a decision, what's the consequences?
You may miss that opportunity.
You can miss opportunities.
But I do. Okay, so do you?
Wait! Before you ask another question,
Okay.
you'll miss opportunities, and things could get worse. Because if you need to make a decision, and there's a challenge or a problem, whatever, and you waiting for it to resolve itself, because I've done that. Like, Lord, fix it. Like, Lord, speak to them.
Yeah.
Like, Lord, change their mind. No, some decisions you have to engage. You have to do something. If you don't do something, things can get worse. Like, for example, back to spiritual. If God tell you to get that out of your diet, you should. Like, God spoke to me and said, you are not eating healthy foods.
Yeah.
He said, he told me that some time ago. Well, I'll kind of, Well, see, now I had to make a decision. Okay, I got to start eating healthy foods.
Yeah.
So I'm changing the way I eat. And there are things that I won't. Like them fries, them waffle fries down at this restaurant. I want those waffle fries. Well, there are some things that we have to make difficult decisions on. If we don't make the decisions, let's say it's relational, it can get worse.
Yeah. That's good. I see where you come from that perspective. So yeah, I agree with that. When I listen to podcasts, especially when I listen to podcasts 40, 45 minutes or longer, what I do a lot of times is I'll listen to it, but then I'll go back and listen to it, especially if I feel like it's something that has blessed me. I'll go back and listen to it because a lot of times there are things that may have been said that I may not have caught the first time, but I'll later catch on the second time. So if you're in our audience and you're watching and this topic has really hit home with you, we encourage you to not just hear it for the first time, but come back and listen to it as well, because I think there are sometimes you may listen to a podcast and you may miss something the first time, but you have to come back and check it out on the second time. And that's the reason why we keep it on our platforms on YouTube and also on where in the Google Play or iTunes, wherever you may listen to the audio version of it, because there are some things you may have missed the first time that you may need to listen to it on the second time.
I like to close out with something. For those of you that this podcast was a blessing for you, I would like to leave with you the thought that our decision making should become more intentional and that we should have a framework for how we're making decisions. And that framework should not just be emotions. it can't. Emotions are God made us emotional beings. Okay, let's put emotions in a slot. But let's add those three things, and I'm going to add two more. Let's add something into our framework, okay? Emotions, okay? Wisdom. What have you learned? What in your past? What are pattern connections? Counsel, outside counsel, people who have the expertise, who have some understanding of where you're going. Prayer or God, because He can help you to see all down the road. And then two other practical things. What are your values? What are your priorities? What are your values? What are your priorities? If you add those 5 things to it, I think it will help you to make better decisions.
That's good. So next week, we're going to be talking about when you feel called to lead, but you don't feel ready.
Woo.
So again, if you thought that this conversation was helpful, please be sure to like it, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what's one thing that you got from this conversation. And then also make sure you catch us next week, because we're going to be talking about if you feel called to lead, but you don't feel ready. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss it.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.